Hello, hello, and welcome to another episode of Inner Work for Greater Good. My name is Emily Eldridge. I am the founder of Change Light and the creator of the Change Light system, where I teach you inner work that accelerates your power to make a difference, to feel better so you can do better and do good. This is what this is all about. So today, I want to talk about this idea of it's not an idea, it's like doing what feels good. Now, the question is, why should you do what feels good? And that may seem like a stupid question, because it's like, well, why not? But you know what? So many of us, and I found this a lot in my own journey and my own overcoming my inner struggles, that I had certain inner blocks to doing what would feel good for me. And a lot of times that had to do with the programming I received as a kid. For example, and I've run into this with my clients as well, where like parents might have said, my parents might have said to me, or in terms of my clients, the parent might have said, well, you can't go out and play until you fill in the blank. So until you finish your homework, until you make your bed, until you do your chores. And so there's this, what became ingrained in me and in other people I know, for example, just one reason why, it may feel hard to do, it feels good, is it became this sort of delayed good feeling. Like you can't actually do what feels good until after you've done something that doesn't feel good, or that's a requirement, or that you have to do, or that's an obligation. And so it was this sort of, delaying gratification, or I don't know if that's the right word, like delaying happiness, delaying joy, delaying good feelings until after you've done what doesn't feel so good. But the problem with that, just as one example of why we tend to have trouble sometimes doing what feels good and allowing ourselves to do what feels good and going towards what feels good, is because that can turn into a pattern in life that is like, for example, people end up just then doing what they have to do, taking care of, paying the bills or taking care of responsibilities, all this kind of stuff. And then they never get to that point of actually doing what feels good, or they feel like they don't deserve to do what feels good, or don't deserve those good feelings because they haven't, done everything on their to-do list or fulfilled certain obligations. And so what can end up happening is you end up not doing what feels good because, no, I've got to do all these other things first. So I'm just using that as one example of the kind of programming that we can receive as children. And then we carry that into adulthood. And then before you know it, you're actually not doing anything that feels good because you don't feel worthy of it, because you haven't done all your other responsibilities, because of the wonderful things he does. All right, that was Wizard of Oz moment. But because, and so the point is, we carry these subconscious beliefs, and then we end up, in these subconscious patterns of the delayed gratification. Now, I understand there are also scientific studies that talk about, it's the marshmallow study is one of the takeaways that people, got from that, was that actually the kids who were most successful were the ones in life, were the ones who actually delayed gratification and didn't immediately take the marshmallow. That's apparently, I don't know if that's a correct reading of that study, but that was one reading of that study. So my point is, I get that there are, valid reasons why, people might say, well, don't just do what feels good. And that's not what I'm saying. I'm not saying only do what feels good. But I am saying that we can tend to deny ourselves that good feeling. And so that's why sometimes when I'm talking about doing what feels good, we may have like a subconscious reaction to that. The only reason why this came up for me is because I launched our new free course and free community. So I'm very excited about that. Go to changelight.world, join us, have fun, take the free course. So that's a whole other announcement. But I noticed that when I was talking about within one element of the course, I realized as I was saying something to which people might have some objections, meaning like doing what feels good. And it comes out of one of the techniques that I teach in that free course that has to do with honoring your M powers. And those 3 M powers I've talked about in previous episodes. And that when you honor your M powers, that part of the question of honoring your M powers is actually to ask each one what would feel good for you. So it's asking your empowers what would feel good for them. And as I was explaining the technique, it's really simple. Again, take the free course, it's all in there. But as I was explaining the technique, I realized that sometimes there's that, oh, I don't know, do what feels good. No. And because what often happens is we have that practical side of ourselves that can be one pushback, one part of us that has objections to doing what feels good, that says, no, you've got to do what you need to do. You've got to take care of those responsibilities and do your job, et cetera, et cetera. Like you don't have time to do what feels good, or no, you don't deserve that, or any of these other things. So that's all by way of saying, I'm like basically speaking to those objections that you might have, and I've certainly had historically, to doing what feels good, because I really do want to get to why it is important and absolutely necessary in life to do things that feel good, and then ultimately how doing those things that feel good do actually serve those other requirements and practical necessities of life, and those things that we don't want to do. It's really quite a magical thing. Now, I discovered this when I actually first developed this technique for honoring your empowers. And I found that, so let me just back up, sorry. So the three empowers, of course, are your impresario, your sovereign, and your free spirit. Now, your free spirit is like that inner child that's so joyful and so happy and so exuberant and enthusiastic. And it's all about feeling. And it's all about doing what feels good, and playfulness and expansiveness and joy and pleasure. So the free spirit, that's of all the three empowers, that's really like, that's sort of its purview. I mean, the sovereign and the impresario obviously have things that feel good for them. But when it comes to this sort of like joyfulness and aliveness, most of that I found into that energy comes from your free spirit. The problem is that a lot of times, especially as we come, oftentimes in childhood because we're taught to, but then, or because circumstances necessitated it, but then into adulthood, we end up shafting that free spirit. We end up denying it, we ignore it, we dismiss it, we criticize it. We basically, again, a lot of this is unconscious, is we tell ourselves that no, we shouldn't do what our free spirit wants to do. There are all kinds of negative consequences to this. One of them, for example, is burnout. If we only do what we think we have to do or should do, and we deny what feels good and what gives us pleasure, then that is actually, I found with my clients and with myself too, a big recipe for burnout, because we then don't have that aliveness, that feeling of joy, and we're just focused on, I just got to get this stuff done, which is draining. And here is where one of the big powers of the free spirit, it's energizing. It fills us with this feeling of joy and pleasure. So if you deny that part of you, then you're basically pushing that underground or underwater or what have you. And then where are you going to find that? You're not going to find it externally. You find it from that free spirit. It's the part of you that has that amazing, wonderful, juicy, yummy feelings for you. And so that's why it is absolutely key to honor that free spirit and to do what feels good for that free spirit. Now, let me just throw in here what I mean by feels good. So when we talk about feeling good, some people might confuse that as, well, it feels good for me to drink this drink, or it feels good for me to go shopping all the time, or it feels good. I am not talking about activities that are maybe numbing, that could be addictive, that are in any way unhealthy, ultimately unhealthy. I'm not saying that going shopping is in and of itself unhealthy, but when it becomes a way of trying to negate negative feelings, that's when it's not healthy. So I'm talking about what feels good from this deeper space of pleasure, not from a space of, I'm trying to not feel bad. Does that make sense? So nothing that's avoidant or addictive or in any way sort of like a chemical numbing. We're talking about things that feel good. So let me give you an example. I'm going to give you an example. One of the reasons why I brought this up, but really this isn't I'll just give you the example of why I'm thinking of this. Is in my work right now, today, this morning, I was thinking, you know, oh gosh, I've got all these things I've got to do. I've got to fulfill this obligation. I've got to answer this person. I've got to, and I was noticing though, that I didn't really want to do those things, at least in terms of my work. What I really want to do is start working on more courses to create. That's this like good feeling that I have. And when I think about doing that, that's like, yeah, that would feel good. Now that's also productive because that's something I need to do anyway. But the point is, I was in this sort of inner struggle momentarily where it's like, no, but you have to do all these other things. But it was like, no, but I really feel like doing this right now. And here's why I'm going to do that. Now, this was before I started doing this episode. Here's why I'm going to do that. Once I'm done with this episode, I'm going to do what feels good for me in terms of my work, because I know from experience and from honoring my empowers and from, you know, just having witnessed what happens when I do what feels good, what I'm feeling inspired to do in this moment, is that by doing that, that's going to open up this flow of inspiration and energy and motivation and creativity and ideas, which will then carry into doing those other things that in the moment I don't necessarily feel like doing, but I know they need to be done. So this is one of the big powers of doing what feels good for you and what feels good for your empowers. Honoring those parts is that basically by doing what feels good is you open that incredible space, the energy inside, the joy inside, the expansion inside, the motivation, the good, yummy feelings that will energize you and motivate you to then do whatever feels good in that moment, but then to do more. Because you're building that good feeling. You're not just building, you're even just opening space for those good feelings inside that then expand into and carry into other activities that you want to do or you need to do, but also that can help open up more of that inspiration for more things that feel good for you, which may, or even more ways of doing things that feel good, more good feeling ways of doing things. So instead of it just being that I have to do this because it's an obligation and then you slog through it, from that good feeling space, you also get ideas for, well, here's how I can actually do that thing that's going to feel good in a way that feels good for me. And it builds and builds and builds. And ultimately, and you know me, I'm a broken record about this, it's going to light you up. So doing what feels good for you brings forward more of that light that's within you. And so you're going to end up lighting up. And then when you do those things, whatever they are, you're going to bring that light into the world. And then you're also going to infect, if you will, other people with your light. You're going to affect them with your light. You're going to do things that feel good and that ultimately do good because you're doing them with a good feeling, not from obligation or requirement or slogging or negativity or resentment or any of those other things that we can end up feeling when we don't really honor what feels good. Instead, you're doing them with light and with joy and with pleasure and with freedom. And other people will feel that from you and they'll get that from you and they'll feel inspired by you. And then you're bringing more of your light into the world. So that's why it is vital that you do what feels good for you, that you tap into when we're working with those empowers. Again, take the free course. It tells you how to do this, but working with those empowers and doing what feels good for them, it's ultimately going to serve what feels good for you. And when it feels good for you, then all the energy and inspiration and creativity and excitement and yummy, yummy feelings that you've been desiring will fill you and fuel you to do even more and to do it better than that. So I hope this has been helpful. As always, I'm Emily Eldridge with ChangeLight.world. Come to our community. It's free. It's free. Community.changelight.world. Join us. be with us, learn how to do the drawing out process, or at least the first 3 steps of it, learn how to honor your empowers and really heal those struggles and reveal more of your strengths so that you can light up. And as you light up, you'll light up the world. All right. Mwah. I love you. Thank you so much. And I will see you again next week.